Hi everyone and welcome. I am joined today by Professor Ivan Kachanovsky, professor of political science in Canada. You, of course, are a Ukrainian Canadian who focus much on political science and also Ukrainian studies. You also brought a scandal to Canada when you revealed that alleged World War II hero that was celebrated in the Canadian Parliament. He actually served in a Ukrainian Nazi unit in the SS Division Galicia. Now, he was celebrated for fighting the Russians in the Second World War, and nobody seemed to put two and two together in terms of who the Russians were fighting and as opposed to who they were allied to. Um, Professor Kachanovsky, you also have a journal article which is out, will be out soon, with the title "Who Perpetrated the Maidan Massacre? Who Overthrew the Ukrainian Government in 2014?" Now, this will be published in the Econ Journal Watch, and we'll leave a link to the journal in the description. Before we delve into this, I guess the context is quite important. That is in 2014, during Maidan, there was a massacre in Kiev, and it was blamed on the government, that is the administration of President Yanukovych. And this event had a very critical role in terms of, well, mobilizing, if not legitimizing, the toppling of President Yanukovych, which then triggered a war that still goes on today. So it's quite a significant event. And yet, what we learned shortly after was this leaked phone call between the Estonian foreign minister and the EU foreign affairs chief, in which they revealed that they knew it was the Western-backed opposition that was likely behind the attack.
All the evidence shows that people who were killed by snipers from both sides, among policemen and people from the streets, that they were the same snipers killing people from both sides. So that, and then she also showed me some photos. She said that as medical doctor, she can, say that it is the same handwriting, the same type of bullets, and it's really disturbing that now the new coalition, that they don't want to investigate what exactly happened, so that there is now stronger and stronger understanding that behind snipers it was not Yanukovych, but it was somebody from the new coalition.
But we don't speak much about this massacre anymore, much like that we shouldn't speak about Nord Stream. So I thought we can first address, if you can, I guess, outline what are the main narratives about what happened on Maidan versus what we have learned from evidence.
Yes, I think this is a very important issue and crucial issue based on my research. What happened in Ukraine in February of 2014 when there was a change of the Ukrainian government and during the Euromaidan mass protest in Kiev and other regions of Ukraine. And I think this is why it's so crucial issue and which I examined is because it escalated to conflicts between Ukraine and Russia, between Russia and the West, and also in internal conflicts in Crimea and Donbass, and led to ultimately to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And this is subject of my new book, which would be published as well on this topic. And this is why I examine this massacre very closely. And I also examine obviously of the Yanukovych government because it was directly linked to this massacre. So main narrative basically which is promoted by the governments and the media in Ukraine and also in the West is that this was Yanukovych forces, snipers or police unit, Berkut police unit, which massacred Maidan protesters who were unarmed, peaceful, and this basically led to Yanukovych fleeing from Kiev, and this led to his impeachment, kind of legal removal from by vote of the parliament. And so because he basically abdicated and left Ukraine since he was responsible for the Maidan massacre. And this is a sick narrative which is still promoted by all the major media in the West, with just some notable exceptions. And New York Times recently published a article saying this exactly the same, and so on. So this is just unbelievable narrative because all the evidence which I examined actually is very different based on actually primary data. So this is, I think, a very important narrative. And also these Russian narratives, Russia claims that this was a fascist coup, which led to creation of a neo-Nazi state in Ukraine. And so they also used this to justify Russian invasion of Ukraine.
So, but actually, no one has, I think, researched this massacre more than yourself, and you went to the court hearings as well and followed this process. Well, what is it I think people should know about this? Yeah, what was actually revealed in the courts? Well, we've gone through the documents.
Yes, I examined all the publicly available documents. I examined this massacre starting from when it was happening. I was watching this live, as I was watching all the events during Maidan, since I specialized in researching politics and conflicts in Ukraine, political violence. So for me, this was very important development, very crucial development. And I since researched Maidan massacre since, again, for now more than 11 years. And I still looking for any other publicly available evidence, but I think now it's very clear based on evidence which I collected and which I presented in my open access book, which was recently published by Palgrave Macmillan, major Western academic press. And this is like open access book, which is really available for anybody who wants to read and download. And so in this study, I summarized all this evidence. And I also published 3 peer-reviewed journal articles, which also examine all the evidence concerning the Maidan massacre. And as you mentioned, there is a new peer-reviewed journal article, which will be published, I think, later this month about this event as well. So what I did, in addition to just looking into videos, all publicly available videos, looking into testimonies of witnesses about this massacre, I also examined all the Maidan massacre trial hearings which were taking place in Ukraine. And they were broadcast on YouTube live. And there is also a recording of each trial session. So I look into all these trial, basically, sessions which were publicly available since 2015. And there was a Maidan massacre verdict issued in 2023. And now there is a Court of Appeals hearing about the same case. So this is still kind of, which I still research. So based on all this evidence, which is publicly available, which is on YouTube, but only few dozen people were watching basically this trial session. And media, Western media, Ukrainian media, did not report all the revelations, which is just incredible revelations, which took place during this trial. Again, publicly available, and I examined all this and presented all this evidence in my book and in my peer-reviewed journal articles. So basically, absolute majority of wounded Maidan activists who were wounded during the Maidan massacre on February 20th, 2014, actually testified during the Maidan massacre trial or during the investigation after the Maidan massacre. So they testified that they saw snipers who were located in the Hotel Ukraina and other Maidan control locations, and that they were shot and wounded, and that other Maidan activists were shot and wounded by these snipers. So this is just unbelievable because official investigation denied that there were any such snipers. So this was regarded as conspiracy theory. So and this is why a lot of media just claim this is just conspiracy theory and so on. Even so now, even people who were there because they were wounded, absolute majority of them testified that they saw such snipers, that they were told by other Maidan activists about such snipers in this Hotel Ukraina and other Maidan control locations, and that they were themselves shot and wounded by these snipers, and they also to other Maidan activists shot and wounded. And this is supported by videos. This is supported by ballistic forensic examinations, which were conducted by government experts, and also by forensic medical examinations, which were conducted by government experts. So, for instance, during the Maidan massacre trial, there was a Belgian television video which was shown during this trial in its entirety. So, about 1 hour long video. And was part of the most famous video of the Maidan massacre, which was shown by all major television networks right after this massacre took place, was presented as evidence that this Maidan activists were shot and killed and massacred by Berkut police or by government snipers. And actually, the entire video, which I also obtained from Belgian journalists who filmed this video, so actually shows that before this group of Maidan snipers were massacred, they were led to this area, specifically for the area in which they would be shot, by two other Maidan activists who led them for no reason. And they could not even explain this reason during their interviews and investigation. And also that they saw, and this video which shows that this group of protesters were shot from direction of Hotel Ukraina in the back. And they noticed this and they asked snipers there not to shoot at them. So this was just incredible. And Maidan massacre trial verdict confirms this and stated this is clear evidence that they were shooting from Hotel Ukraina into direction of Maidan activists, specifically aiming to kill them and not for any other reason. So this is like ballistic forensic examinations conducted by experts for Maidan massacre. Investigation showed that many Maidan activists were shot from direction of Hotel Ukraina and other Maidan control buildings, and forensic medical examinations also found that almost all Maidan activists were killed and wounded from very steep directions, from the side, from the left or right side, or from the back. While police whose members are accused of this massacre, actually, of Maidan activists were located in front of these activists and on the same ground level. So this is just unbelievable. All this evidence is publicly available, and I created video appendixes with such testimonies. And in addition to this, there were also about 100 witness testimonies by prosecution witnesses who testified again about such snipers in Hotel Ukraina and other Maidan control locations. And they testified also that they saw activists shot by the snipers. So this is just evidence, which is overwhelming evidence, and it was never reported and by the media. It is basically this basic cover-up of this evidence, because obviously this is a very explosive evidence, and these revelations were confirmed to a certain extent, or to partially admitted even by Maidan massacre trial verdict in Ukraine. And this is also very important admission, because now you have official verdict which states that there were such snipers located in the Hotel Ukraina, that this Hotel Ukraina was controlled by Maidan activists at the time of Maidan massacre, and that many Maidan activists were shot and killed and wounded from this hotel at the time when it was controlled by Maidan activists. And this is also verdict stated, in addition to this, verdict stated that also such Maidan snipers shot at the BBC television crew, which is this famous video of this. And in addition, this verdict stated that there is no evidence that Yanukovych or his Minister of Internal Affairs or other government leaders, officials, issued any order to massacre Maidan activists. So this is, I think, incredible revelation, which is not reported by any major media, but I published this and presented this in my academic studies, and they receive a lot of on social media, they receive a lot of attention, and my book is already downloaded and read by and viewed by I think now more than 300,000 people, which is also just testimony to the importance of this event.
But yeah, I thought this was interesting because I read through this article as well as your other work, and the evidence seems to be quite overwhelming in terms of the testimonies that were given of where the shots came from, who fired them. Again, the direction of the bullets, which you also have outlined. All the evidence is pretty much there. So, what is the counter argument to this? Because in this article you write, you address I guess your where some argument comes from. You address an article from I forgot his name. Let's call him a scholar in Atlantic Council. This is the article you start addressing. Atlantic Council is, by the way, a NATO-led, NATO think tank. It's referred to, but it's quite dismissive. It just if you fall outside the narrative, it's essentially said, well, it's repeating Kremlin talking points and Russian propaganda. But besides smears, what is the counter argument? Are anyone actually addressing this evidence and coming with some reasonable explanation, or is it just smears at this time?
No, there is no such studies, again, based on primary evidence. So other people who kind of still dismiss my findings, which is quite incredible because of all the evidence, they do not look into evidence. So because they cannot obviously challenge the evidence, so they try to resort to ad hominem attacks, claiming that I am somehow linked to Russia, which is just absurd because I'm a Ukrainian scholar. Again, have no links to Russia at all. And I research kind of violence in Ukraine, all the violence in Ukraine, political violence in Ukraine since World War II, and even during Stalin's Great Era, so including modern conflicts, war in Donbass and the Russia-Ukraine wars. This is again, but they try to kind of paint me as some kind of linking to Russia falsely, and this is just again another argument because they made up all these kind of claims without any evidence and just claiming this is like kind of just to dismiss my and try to kind of smear me, and also kind of they deny even such evidence which I presented in my studies. So they deny that Maidan massacre trial verdict made such findings, that it issued such findings about Maidan snipers located in Hotel Ukraina, and that Maidan protesters were killed and wounded from this hotel, and this hotel was controlled by Maidan activists. So this is one kind of such self-proclaimed expert, I think Katie Young, who is published articles in this neoconservative Bulwark, I think magazine or kind of just website, in which she claimed that the Maidan massacre trial verdict did not issue anything like that, which I wrote in my social media comments and posts, and also in my book. Even so, she is not able. And I actually, even so, I quoted all this Maidan massacre trial verdict text, which was posted to the official database of Ukrainian court decisions online, and which is almost 1 million words long. And so I quoted specific references to this in the translation, the Ukrainian translation. I also translation from Ukrainian into English. I also posted such excerpts. Almost, I think, about 20 pages of excerpts from this trial verdict in translation, which shows all this kind of references to Hotel Ukraina snipers, that this was controlled by Maidan activists, that there was no order from Yanukovych, and so on. But she basically made up all these claims and posted these false claims that this never happened. Even so, she herself does not know any Ukrainian language, and she never read this verdict because she never cited this verdict. She just relied on Ukrainian media reports about this verdict, and also on Radio Liberty report about this verdict. And all this media, which actually was funded by USAID and other United States government agencies or Western foundations like Soros Foundation and so on. So all this media omitted also all these references to Maidan snipers and to, again, false flag Maidan massacre from this verdict. And so this is, again, just example of argument. They cannot challenge evidence, so they claim all this made up all these false claims, or just omit all this evidence which is publicly available, including recognition of de facto recognition by the Maidan massacre trial verdict of this false flag Maidan massacre, which is confirmation of what I did in my Maidan massacre papers and articles and book. And but there is also kind of evidence that this is that Maidan massacre trial verdict, which blame that Berkut for shooting and killing of about 31, I think 31 of Maidan activists out of 49 who were killed on February 20th, 2014, actually was based on not on evidence but based on for just one forensic ballistic examination, which basically which was falsified because it overturned about 40 other previous forensic ballistic examinations by Ukrainian government experts, including the one which specifically was conducted by automatic system without any kind of human involvement, and found that there was no link between, well, there was no match between bullets which were extracted from bodies of wounded and killed Maidan activists and bullets which were shot from Kalashnikovs, which were used by Berkut anti-riot police in Ukraine. So this is kind of evidence which is, I think, very clear, and so and this verdict kind of falsifies this kind of that. This kind of basic findings that or made false findings because it kind of cannot just issue decision to the contrary, completely just dismiss argument, since Ukrainian justice system is not independent, and even this trial was threatened by far-right activists who went into a trial courtroom twice and basically attacked Berkut policemen without any consequences, and they also put car tires in front of this court, Svetoshin district court in Kiev, and threatened to burn this building again without any consequences, specifically because they did not like what they saw during this Maidan massacre trial. So this is just kind of all the evidence is very clear, and but kind of people who just make this claims that there were still kind of claims that there was no Maidan snipers, that Hotel Ukino was not controlled by Maidan activists, and that this is like conspiracy theory, that this is some kind of Russia just propaganda and so on. They basically just show that they are not a serious people. This is like a serious experts, that they are just kind of they basically promote a fraudulent and deliberately fraudulent claims contrary to all evidence, and this is not what a scholar is supposed to do. And you mentioned this book by Adrian Keretnitsky, who published a book, and in this book he omitted all the evidence which I presented in my academic studies, but he claims that actually this was not responsibility of Ukrainian police who massacred Maidan protesters, but he claims that this was actually responsibility of Russia, that Russia used Yanukovych kind of government forces and perpetrator basically was involved in this massacre, specifically kind of to overthrow Yanukovych and to seize Crimea and so on. And he uses no evidence whatsoever. He just makes this claim, and this is like published by Yale University Press. Even so, all the evidence is to the contrary, and even Maidan massacre trial verdict and official Ukrainian investigation stated clearly that there was no evidence of any Russian government snipers involvement or any Russian government agents involvement in this massacre. But you have now a book published by this kind of Karetnitsky, who is not expert, who is not academic expert. He is linked to this NATO kind of associated kind of think tank, which is funded by Western governments and major weapons companies, specifically to kind of perpetrate and propagate such a false narrative. So I think contrary to all the evidence which is publicly available.
But it is fascinating how narratives are pushed, because and also the stories that were what was actually reported in Ukraine, because as we know, after the coup in 2014, the media was purged along with the political opposition. And what we learned now from Trump cutting funding to USAID was that while the independent media was destroyed in Ukraine, the Americans stepped in and took over, in which USAID financed between 85 to 90% of Ukrainian media outlets, which is kind of overwhelming to have a yeah, a great power with such huge interest in the country, effectively taking over all, all the media through finance. Now, obviously, they didn't. That doesn't mean that there's direct links, that there are proofs that America told them exactly what to write. But I think it's reasonable to assume that the people they brought on their payrolls and what they reported, that there had to be some conformity with the U.S. narrative if they still wanted funding, of course. But it often results in these narratives I see. But yeah, not just the media in Ukraine, but also across the West. These are narratives where there's no need for evidence at all, just as long as they use the right sloganeering. And we see that all opposition, that is all criticism, is or counter arguments is just dismissed as Russian propaganda or Russian talking points, or yeah, as you very well described. But I also wanted to ask you though, who we know that yeah, the bullets didn't come from um, the rifles of Berkut. We know that they came from Hotel Ukraine. We know the direction again also from the same place. But who was behind the shooting then? Who has been has someone been identified in terms of yeah, who did the massacres?
Yes, I think there's also clear evidence that this massacre was of the Maidan protesters, but also of police, was perpetrated by elements of oligarchic Maidan opposition and far-right organizations, including the Right Sector and Svoboda. And the evidence includes admissions by many snipers. So I cited 14 such admissions by 14 Maidan snipers who admitted. So many of them admitted that they shot police, Berkut police, and this was start of the Maidan massacre. After this, Berkut police and internal troops fled from the Maidan area because they had no firearms to shoot at the snipers, and this is the same snipers actually later shot also Maidan activists from the Hotel Ukraina and other Maidan control locations. So such admissions, as I mentioned, was made by members of the far-right link Maidan snipers company, who was led by one of kind of far-right activists who admitted in Ukrainian media that he organized this company with support of the right sector, and this company included people from Western Ukraine mostly, and many of them admitted, as I mentioned, shooting into police. And I first identified this company and commander of this company as involved in the Maidan massacre in my study, which was presented in 2015 at the annual meeting of American Political Science Association. And so this is like so they admitted basically shooting the police, but they were silent about shooting what happened with Maidan, shooting of Maidan activists. And head of or commander of this company, who was elected to the Ukrainian parliament after the Maidan massacre, he stated that Ukrainians are not yet ready to learn what happened during the Maidan massacre. So this is he stated in the Ukrainian television interview. So basically admitting that there is something to hide. And again, he was never investigated, and nobody from his company was prosecuted for and sentenced for the massacre of police. Even so, they admitted this and investigation, and there was no kind of prosecution of members of this company for the massacre of Maidan activists. Even so, these videos and other like testimonies that like videos which show that this members of this company along with commander of this company which they moved to the Hotel Ukraina during the Maidan massacre, and they were in the Hotel Ukraina, and they were also filmed shooting into direction of Maidan activists during this Maidan massacre. And this was filmed by I think two television networks. It was filmed by Russia Today and also by German ZDF television. And so German ZDF television actually filmed this group of Maidan snipers shooting from Hotel Ukraina into direction of Maidan activists. below, but they show this footage in only in one program, like few weeks after the Maidan massacre, and then remove this footage. And so I was able to save this footage, this video footage from the German public television, and also they actually very important revelation, because this German public television company filmed this like right sector link group of Maidan snipers shooting into the direction of Maidan activists. And so, but they also filmed this in a hotel room, Hotel Lukina, which was rented at the time by another German television. Actually was rented by ZDF television, but at the same time there was another German television company, RDF, which filmed entire massacre from this hotel room, Hotel Ukraina room, and they hid, and they never kind of released footage of this massacre, which they filmed. So this was never released and only leaked by somebody. This footage was only released and shown at the Maidan massacre trial, and was posted also kind of on different websites without any sound. So this is just also kind of quite unbelievable, because later sound appears, but at the very important time of the massacre there was missing sound. And this footage was filmed actually when this group of far-right snipers were shooting from from the Hotel Ukraina, from this same room from which this footage was filmed, again into the direction of Maidan activists. So basically you have cover up by German public television of the snipers. So you have, so this is clear evidence of this one group involvement in Maidan massacre, but there is also admissions by several members of kind of former members of Georgian military, and who stated publicly on in various interviews, Italian media interviews, Israeli media interviews, Macedonian media interviews, and also Russian media interviews, and they also stated this for testimonies for the Maidan massacre trial. And US also documentary, they stated that they were members of Maidan sniper groups, and they mentioned also the same company which was linked to the right sector, and members of people who were members of this company as one group of snipers. And they also mentioned that they were also snipers from Georgia, and including themselves, that they were told by leaders of Maidan opposition at the time, and also by former president of Georgia, to basically to conduct massacre of both police and protesters. By creating such chaos and blaming kind of so each side would believe that they are shot by another side, and so there are such admissions, and their testimonies are consistent with all evidence which I mentioned in my studies. And even so, their testimonies were dismissed as basically again as not real testimonies. They were claimed to be some kind of actors which were hired by Russian intelligence and so on. Even so, they presented their all real names, and as I mentioned, all the evidence is consistent in their testimonies with evidence which I examined about Hotel Lukina snipers, about this group of far-right linked snipers, and so on. And they also their testimony was admitted. Testimony of one of them was admitted for the Maidan massacre trial, and it was shown at the Maidan massacre trial, and Ukrainian prosecution had to confirm that this person used his real name, and that he was in Ukraine before the Maidan massacre, crossing border of Ukraine. And this sniper said Georgian sniper said that they actually arrived during the Maidan massacre, but they were using false documents with false names. So this is again all is consistent, but it was never investigated. And so now you have also evidence of involvement of Georgian kind of opposition as kind of elements in this Maidan massacre, which is I think also important dimension.
I find it strange how how everything is somehow dismissed, though, as if it would be some kind of Russian propaganda. Now it's also because the role of the extreme right or fascists were quite obvious. This was indeed openly discussed in the Western media until we no longer did. Again, from BBC, Guardian, all of them wrote initially about these groups, which proven to have a very big role during Maidan. Indeed, the leader of the group C14, he sits on camera bragging about how they had a key role while there was a minority, they nonetheless had an overwhelming influence on Maidan, given the use of violence. And you mentioned the right sector, the leader there, Dmitry Yarosh. He threatened Zelensky, didn't it, when Zelensky had won the election, because he ran on a platform of actually promoting peace in Donbass. And I think along the lines, he threatened that Zelensky would hang from a tree if he tried to implement essentially the peace mandate, which he had won by 73%. Now, he wasn't arrested for this. Instead, he was put into a very high military position in Ukraine, which caused controversy. So usually if you threaten the life of the president, you don't end up with a massive promotion. But this kind of shows that how much power they actually have accrued. And yeah, the same can be said for the I guess the founder of Azov Battalion. Andrei Biletsky, at one point, maybe well before this, he was cited even in British media saying that the historic mission for the Ukrainian nation was to lead the white race against Semite-led Untermenschen. I mean, this is kind of a very radical stuff, but again, him as well ended up in a very top position after he also, by the way, threatened Zelensky if Zelensky tried to remove any of the heavy weapons, especially around the Zolote region. But it's for some reason this is treated as some kind of a conspiracy theory or Russian propaganda that the fascist groups have accrued a lot of power. I mean, they celebrate Bandera, they change the names on streets, build monuments for fascist sympathizer. Even Azov, the insignia is mixes the Wolfsengel with the black sun. It's just again right in the face in the U.S. Congress. They used to discuss why it was problematic to finance fascist groups, but what happened there? Because these kind of groups were quite important in terms of using violence to accrue political power. But how was this just whitewashed? I think then primarily in the West.
I think this is also a very important issue about the involvement of the far right and power of the far right in Ukraine, since my studies show that far right was involved in this Maidan massacre of Maidan activists and police, which led to overthrow of Ukrainian government and subsequent conflicts in Ukraine. And at the time of the Maidan massacre, actually Azov organization, which later organized Azov, was a part of the right sector. And this was openly neo-Nazi organization called Patriot of Ukraine, which was a paramilitary branch of National Social Alliance, which was National Social Assembly, which was using all these neo-Nazi symbols and was led by this current leader of Azov, Biletsky, who is kind of uses all this openly neo-Nazi kind of statements and so on. And I cited such statements in my peer-reviewed journal article, which was published about this and examined involvement of far right in the Maidan massacre and the war in Donbass, also in Odessa massacre, which is another important case of violence in my studies. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why far right became so powerful and why their power is much bigger compared to their numbers. Because in terms of membership, far right organizations were relatively small during the Maidan. They were like just several hundred members of the right sector, but because they relied on violence and because they were able to kind of overthrow Yanukovych government in alliance with oligarchic opposition, and this was de facto supported by the Western governments. So this led to a situation when far right, including open neo-Nazis like Azov movement and C14, they attain outsized power in Ukraine, and they still rely on violence and threat of violence. And for this reason, why Zelensky abandoned peace agreement in 2019 when he was elected on a peace platform is because of threats by the far right and specifically by the right sector, whom you mentioned, but also by Azov which created their own organization shortly after the Maidan massacre, and shortly after they were involved also in the Odessa massacre in 2014, which is another important case. So, and this is a very dangerous situation because far right now has possibility also to kind of try to prevent a peaceful deal in Ukraine to end the Russia-Ukraine war, and they have kind of ability to veto such a peace deal by basically threatening Zelensky and other kind of Ukrainian government officials, but Zelensky's response to this was not to try to limit this influence of far right, but he tried to kind of placate them, and he tried to make alliance with them and to give basically Azov new opportunities to create now. Azov became not a battalion, which was original their unit, but after the Maidan massacre, but now they have even army corps, like which is was just recently created from one of the Azov brigades, and there were two Azov brigades, and now we have one corps, and one brigade, and there are other units of Azov. So this is just a very powerful far right in Ukraine, including open neo-Nazis, but for the reasons that this was, again, for political reasons, the involvement of far right in the Maidan massacre was denied and dismissed by the Ukrainian government, by the Ukrainian media, by the Western government and the Western media. And this continued to much bigger extent after the Russian invasion because it became politically useful to use this far right and specifically Azov movement since they are very ideologically motivated. So they have a kind of incentive, very strong incentive to fight against Russia. So they were presented now as heroes, as kind of defenders of Ukraine, and so on, as fighting for Ukrainian independence. And they receive now weapons, and they receive support and even glorification from Western media and Western politicians. Even so, the same Azov basically organizations which were and their predecessors were involved in the Maidan massacre, Odessa massacre, and a variety of other human rights abuses, and they are also involved in war crimes in Ukraine during the current Russia-Ukraine war, and this openly threatens Zelensky. So this is basically kind of just done for political reasons, not based on any evidence and we have now continuing whitewashing and glorification of the far right and open neo-Nazis in Ukraine, and this is, I think, a very kind of important development, which would have very significant consequences for Ukraine, and maybe not only for Ukraine, but also there is possibility of backlash and kind of backfire to the West, as already happened with Al Qaeda and other such organizations.
But I was curious, going back to the Maidan of 2014 after the shooting. This is when Yanukovych was pushed out of office. I thought, you had written some interesting things because we in the West now we say, well, it wasn't a coup because he fled, as if this was almost a voluntary choice, or as you write, that this was because he feared he would be held legally accountable for the killings on Maidan. But of course, this is not actually the case. But I was wondering if you could address that, but also what actually happened thereafter, because Yanukovych was, well, before he fled, he was actually pressured into accepting a truce with the political opposition and forming this unity government, which the Western countries, France and Germany and others, signed under as guarantors. So it looked like peace might actually break out before everything fell apart. What happened after the Maidan shooting in terms of the removal of Yanukovych?
Yes, I think I examined this issue also in my forthcoming book. I look into Maidan and the involvement of the United States and basically in a regime change in Ukraine. So this was not only conducted by the Ukrainian opposition, by far right. There is evidence of the U.S. involvement, U.S. government involvement in the regime change in Ukraine, specifically to remove Yanukovych. And one evidence is that U.S. officials were very closely involved, and other kind of members of U.S. government, specifically members of U.S. Congress, like McCain and I think Chris Murphy, another U.S. senator, they openly called for regime change in Ukraine. During Maidan massacre protests, they supported Maidan activists, and there was a very famous video of Victoria Nuland, who was one of key officials in the U.S. State Department at the time, also kind of giving cookies to Maidan activists during this protest against Yanukovych. And according to the evidence which I cite in my study, actually, she met with Yanukovych soon after the start of Maidan protest, and she told him basically that he has to kind of dismiss government of Azarov at the time, which was led by kind of party of regions, which Yanukovych was one of the leaders at the time. So she specifically said that he has to fire kind of this government and to create kind of and replace this government with kind of and include members of Maidan opposition in the government. And this was kind of ultimatum which actually kind of demands by the US, which were part of this open kind of involvement of US government in the overthrow of Yanukovych, because this famous recording of intercepted phone call between Victoria Nuland and US ambassador at the time, a few weeks before Maidan massacre, during her, I think, kind of another visit to Ukraine, probably she was recorded as discussing composition of the new government of Ukraine at the time when, shortly after Yanukovych dismissed the government of Azarov and offered Maidan opposition leaders Yatsenyuk and Klitschko kind of positions in the new government, which was supposed to be a kind of government of national unity. And so they basically, Nuland and US ambassador openly discussed whom to put in this government of Ukraine. And this actually happened after the Maidan, and after Yanukovych fled Ukraine because of what I'm going to describe shortly why he fled, based on evidence. Actually, Yatsenyuk became prime minister of Ukraine, as Victoria Nuland said, and there is also very clear evidence that afterwards Biden administration was very closely involved in formation of Ukrainian government, according to Ukrainian media reports and according to audio recordings of talks of phone calls between Biden and Poroshenko, president of Ukraine. Biden was basically telling Ukrainian government and Poroshenko whom to appoint as prime minister of Ukraine, whom to replace as prime minister of Ukraine, and he also admitted telling Poroshenko to dismiss prosecutor general of Ukraine. So this was kind of clear involvement of US in kind of before the kind of Maidan massacre and also after the Maidan massacre. But in addition to this, I also cite in my studies and in my books another important evidence that this was published, which was published in by two Ukrainian journalists who are pro-Maidan journalists, and they published this series of interviews in their book about Maidan, in which they cited interviews, unquoted interviews by two leaders of Far-Right Svoboda party, which was originally a neo-Nazi party, and which was one of the major parties leading kind of Maidan movement and Maidan opposition at the time. And they cited Ternibok, Oleg Ternibok, who was leader of this party, and they cited deputy of Ternibok, who was also deputy head of Ukrainian parliament during the Maidan. And in their separate interviews, they said that a few weeks before Maidan massacre, they met, and they and other Maidan leaders met with a representative from the West. They did not name this representative, but they said that they have discussion with this Western representative what it would take for the West to stop recognizing Yanukovych as a kind of Yanukovych government in Ukraine, or Yanukovych as leader of Ukraine. And they said that they have basically discussion like this. The Maidan opposition would ask this Western representative how many activists need to be killed or would have to be killed before the West would basically stop recognizing Yanukovych. And they ask like, is 3 people or 5 people enough? The response from the West was not. This is not enough. Like 10 people, no, 10 is not enough. 20 is not enough. So they say they agree on 100. If there would be 100 casualties, people killed during Maidan, kind of this would mean that Yanukovych is responsible, and the West would stop recognizing kind of Yanukovych and his government. And this is exactly what happened. So almost immediately after the Maidan massacre, without any investigation, Maidan opposition kind of claim that there was heavily hunted. So they said that the number of Maidan activists who were killed was 100, and they called this heavily hunted. Even so, actual number was less than 100. So they included people who died from suicide, people who died from medical disease like heart attack and so on. They included people who were kind of actually one person who was killed in the Party of Regions office headquarters, which was during the attack by Maidan opposition. Basically, he was killed by Maidan activists, but he was included in this heavily hunted. So they have clear incentive to create this 100 heavily hunted because of this agreement, and also immediately. After the Maidan massacre, Western governments, and specifically the US government, blame Yanukovych for this massacre, and government forces, even so there was no evidence whatsoever that they were responsible for this at the time, but they were blamed, and Biden in his memoirs wrote that he called Yanukovych right after the Maidan massacre, and Biden at the time was vice president of the US, responsible for Ukraine in the Obama administration, and he said that he told Yanukovych to basically withdraw all government forces, and he said that Yanukovych was responsible for this massacre, and that he has not only to leave Ukraine, not only to leave his presidency, but he has also to leave Ukraine. So this was a threat basically from kind of number 2 person in the U.S. administration, basically to kind of for Yanukovych not only to kind of leave a presidency of Ukraine, but also to leave Ukraine. And this was not just my said, because I cited my studies that there were few attempts to assassinate Yanukovych, and this is a reason why he fled Kyiv right after the Maidan massacre, and after he signed agreement with Maidan opposition and with presence of European Union leaders, foreign ministers from Poland, France, and Germany, to have a kind of to have earlier presidential elections and to investigate Maidan massacre. So he basically had to flee Ukraine, first Kyiv, because there was assassination attempts, and his his vehicle was kind of shot at, and bodyguard was almost wounded, kind of these photos of bullet and so on. He fled, Yanukovych then fled to Kharkiv, and when he was flying to Kharkiv on helicopter, there are like testimonies of pilots of these helicopters that they receive order from a new kind of Maidan government, from new leader of Maidan, who was just appointed as head of interim president of Ukraine, kind of by parliament, that actually to shut down these helicopters if Yanukovych would not kind of if they would not kind of just stop their flights and would extradite and would give up Yanukovych to this Maidan forces. So, and there is also testimony of former president of Ukraine, Leonid Kravchuk, who said that he received information that there was a plan to assassinate Yanukovych, similarly to assassination of Ceausescu, leader of communist Romania, after he was kind of held responsible for similar massacre which took place in Bucharest in Romania in 1989. But according to investigation by a military prosecution office in Romania, this massacre was also kind of falsely blamed by it was falsely blamed to forces of Ceausescu, but actually was conducted by leaders and with involvement of leaders of Romanian opposition who actually seized power. And Yanukovych basically was falsely blamed for this. Even so, he fled Ukraine. And he fled Kyiv and then Ukraine because of assassination attempts against himself, and also his removal by the parliament was kind of was not constitutional. It violated provisions of Ukrainian constitution because there was no impeachment procedure, and there is no such kind of reason for impeachment as was mentioned, abandoning of his position. So he did not abandon his position at the time. He was actually present in Kharkiv, and he gave television interview that he was still in Ukraine. But Parliament nevertheless voted kind of to remove him. And this vote I also cite in this study, which was often presented as evidence that this was democratic vote and kind of expression of democracy and so on, actually was also not only unconstitutional, but it was also conducted under duress because these like testimonies and videos and photos showing that many members of the parliament from the Party of Regions and the Communist Party were basically forced to by Maidan activists, in particular members of this far-right group of snipers, to kind of to go to this parliament and vote for removal of Yanukovych. Even so, again, this kind of this vote was conducted kind of under false pretense. Even so, Yanukovych was still in Ukraine, and because and parliament members voted for removal of Yanukovych under duress. But also, in addition to this, the number of voters for his removal was falsified because a number of parliament members who were present at the time of this vote, according to videos, was about 260, just which was slight majority, and not a number which was around 300, which was later claimed by the media and by Maidan opposition, kind of even more than 300, which was claimed by Maidan opposition leaders and media. So this was also falsified because many kind of upset deputies were recorded as voting for removal of Yanukovych, and there was admission by one of the leaders of Maidan opposition at the time, who was head of Maidan Parliament Committee, and who said that he was ordered basically by kind of leader of Maidan opposition to get access to voting cards of members of the parliament, duplicates, and to use them during such a vote. And so this is like evidence which is clear evidence that this vote was falsified. It was unconstitutional and based on false pretext, and was based on false accusation that Yanukovych was responsible for the Maidan massacre. But in addition to this, there is also very important kind of link to this, because at the time when this vote was held, it was parliament was led by this deputy head of Ukrainian parliament, who actually was from far-right Svoboda party, and according to and he was the one, as I mentioned, who gave this interview about Western representative telling them to have that Yanukovych would be kind of stop being recognized by the West after there will be 100 people killed. And he was the same the same person who was filmed by German ZDF television, accompanying while he accompanied snipers from this far-right right sector link group in the Hotel Ukraina. And this also statement from Svoboda party before the Maidan massacre that they took Hotel Ukraina under their control and guard. And according to investigation, Ukrainian government investigation, one of the hotel rooms, which was occupied by another leader of Svoboda, who was also a member of the parliament, was location from which Maidan sniper shot into BBC television crew during the Maidan massacre. And there is also Ukrainian television video which shows a report, and this report by Ukrainian journalists saying that during the Maidan massacre there were snipers shooting from the same Hotel Ukraina room, which was occupied by Svoboda deputies. So this is just all the evidence and also very important clarifications about the removal of Yanukovych.
Yeah, it's well, it's very interesting though that all of this focus on human rights and empathy, it always is weaponized to sell war as some kind of a peace mission. You also continue to see this all the way today, again a decade later, that even now that a majority of Ukrainians, they want peaceful negotiations and even willing to cede territory. That is the majority of those even outside the areas which are controlled by Russia. Now, yet we see political leaders always referred to as to stand with Ukraine. It never means actually to do what the public wants. It's always just to fight Russians with Ukrainians, it seems. And again, I'm also so surprised now with the Europeans. That is, even as the war comes to an end, they still want to continue fighting because there's still some fighting power left in Ukraine. It's very selective. Again, there's no the express for empathy for Ukrainians is always absent when it doesn't serve the to support the government or to push for further war. That is, all the Ukrainians which are snatched off the streets to be sent to the front line. There's no real mention in the media. No one seemed to care about political, economic, religious freedoms, human rights abuses by the government and their far-right linked groups. It's just, yeah, it's interesting how the only times human rights comes up is in this manipulative way. So it shouldn't be come as a surprise that yeah, human rights and massacres are effectively, if not ordered, seen as a condition that there needs to be some kind of a massacre in order to legitimize a humanitarian intervention. And it's also very strange because great powers they don't behave based on values but again this what is it called heavenly hundred it becomes a propaganda or a marketing tool almost to legitimize regime change. Yeah, I just had one final question, which was a bit about you actually, because how your work has been received. Because I have a colleague and a friend, Estonian professor Rein Mullerson. He used to be, well, back in the days, he used to be the legal advisor of Gorbachev. And when the Estonia declared independence, he wrote the Declaration of Independence for Estonia, and also he worked at very prestigious universities like the London School of Economics. However, because he attended conferences in Russia, because he has this wild belief that it's a good idea to speak to the other side. The Estonians they stripped him of his title as a professor emeritus there, and effectively, yeah, punishing him for attending conferences. This is it. He isn't supported any wars or nothing like this. Yet this is enough. But anyways, it just took me to yours because the way I understand it, you had some problems with your publisher and overall, as a Ukrainian writing about Ukraine, nonetheless, yeah, the academic freedom for us. It's not what it used to be, I guess.
Yes, I think there's also important dimension in this. When I presented my first studies of Maidan massacre at a conference at the University of Alberta, Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies, in October 2014. So this kind of after this, my house and my land and all my property, which I inherited from my mother and which I used to travel and stay in Ukraine doing visits each year when I studied and lived in the US and Canada. So all this property were taken from me and seized illegally by using fraudulent court decisions by the judge who I received information from reliable sources was told basically to issue such decision contrary to all the evidence. So this was basically a politically motivated decision with involvement of people who actually were linked to one of group of the snipers because they were in the same organization. And this is like one case when this retaliation. Another case that they actually kind of put me in this peacemaker and meritorious list for my Maidan massacre studies, which and specifically about involvement of far-right and neo-Nazi organizations such as Right Sector and Azov in the Maidan massacre. So this was regarded as a crime. They also said that I'm put on meritorious list, hit list, because kind of my role in revelations about SS Galicia veteran division, a member who was kind of veteran of US of SS Galicia division, who was kind of given standing ovation by Canadian Parliament members, Canadian government officials and leaders, and also by Zelensky and his government during Zelensky visit. So this was regarded as a crime. So so this is just retaliation against me, kind of And compared to this again, so I compare my experience also in the Soviet Union when I faced expulsion from my university in 1990 when I wrote my undergraduate thesis based on Western economic theories and based on the theory of Max Weber, and said that Soviet economic system was inefficient and was bound to collapse. So they threatened to expel me and from university, and even so they did not expel me. They gave me C mark, and so I could not go to any graduate school at the time. So this is just a kind of my experience is a little bit different. So my perspective, what was going in the West is kind of compared to Ukraine and compared also to the time of the Great Terror in the Soviet Union, when any such links between Western scholars and their Western counterparts were regarded as basically as evidence of crime and evidence of spying, and many people were arrested and executed just basically because they had visited Western countries or they exchanged their correspondence with Western colleagues, which is kind of now I see a lot of similar kind of reaction in terms of now kind of response trying to use the same kind of evidence to kind of as was used by Stalin and Soviet secret police to go against Western scholars who just say or kind of have any contacts with people in Russia and so on. Even so, there is no kind of evidence whatsoever kind of, but they are that they do something illegally, but they are blamed and smeared and trying to be persecuted for this. And so my own personal experience that I was kind of have this problem publishing a peer-reviewed journal article first when it was accepted, but then by peer-reviewed journal, but then after positive peer reviews, but then kind of journal editor refused to publish this article. So I published this article in other two journals, separate articles. So this was published after again positive peer reviews in two journals, major peer-reviewed journals, and later I published now a book, Maidan Massacre book by major academic press. But my another book, which was under attack with Routledge, following very positive peer reviews, was supposed to be already published. This book is about the Russia-Ukraine war and its origins, going back to the Maidan, and like Maidan Massacre and Overthrow of Yanukovych, which is key events and in origins of this war and conflicts which happened, subsequent conflicts which were led finally to Russian invasion of Ukraine. And this book was supposed to be published, but Routledge refused to publish this book unless I would incorporate alternative perspectives. Like I had to say that Nord Stream basically was blown up by Russia, basically that Ukraine is democracy, that there is no proxy war in Ukraine, that Zelensky is a Democrat, and that Russia wanted to occupy entire Ukraine. So all these narratives I have to kind of impute as a kind of viable narrative. Even so, this is contrary to the evidence and contrary to my academic integrity. So I could not do this basically to falsify all these events and to make these claims in my research, because this is not what the evidence shows. So I refused to do this, and I had to cancel book contact with Routledge. And now, just recently, my book, the same book, was accepted for publication by another major Western academic press following peer reviews. Again, a very standard procedure following positive peer reviews. So now this book would be published in summer of this year. And I also, and this book also would be published as open access book, which means that it can be accessible by anybody freely. And this is thanks to crowdfunding, which I was able to, which is still ongoing, and which I was able to obtain support from many people, and also from a small grant from my university. But I think this is a very difficult time to say something contrary to such narratives. But because of my own experience in the Soviet Union, facing such censorship, also kind of what I see, what is going in Ukraine. So I do not how to say I don't regard this as the same extreme situation as we see currently in the West. Even so, this is kind of unacceptable and very difficult to do. But I think the task of a scholar and academic is basically to say what is the truth and not what is politically convenient, and not to make any fraudulent claims. This is why I regard truth as a very important issue, and this kind of my goal is to publish everything and to report everything based on evidence and not based on any political considerations and not based on any narratives.
Yeah, I missed well, not well, maybe not miss is the right word, but I missed at least from the first Cold War the political courage that was in the West, the self-confidence that there was no need to censor media, like Russian media, for example, in the fear that couldn't counter the arguments. There was no need to censor academics, having this kind of purge of all opposition, demand for conformity. There's, I think, yeah, this lack of confidence or intolerance towards opposition. I think it probably will come at a heavy cost if we continue to limit free speech in this way. Anyways, Professor Kachanovsky, I appreciate your time, and I would advise everyone to also read your book, given that it's you had it for open access, so anyone can download it and read it for free. So by all means, I will put a link to this as well. So more people who should be more familiar with realities and facts as opposed to the narratives which are sold. So thanks again, Professor Kachanovsky.
Yes, thank you. This is, I think, a very helpful and very useful conversation, and I think this is a very important issues to discuss, and I hope to publish even more kind of soon about, I mentioned already, this book and these articles, and so again, so it was a pleasure to discuss these issues on your podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, so that he has some sort of, how to say, trust among all these Maidan people and civil society. And second, what was quite disturbing, the same Olga told that, well, all the evidence shows that people who were killed by snipers from both sides, among policemen and people from the streets, that they were the same snipers killing people from both sides.
Well, that's.
So that, and then she also showed me some photos. She said that as medical doctor, she can, say that it is the same handwriting, the same type of bullets, and it's really disturbing that now the new coalition, that they don't want to investigate what exactly happened, so that there is now stronger and stronger understanding that behind snipers it was not Yanukovych, but it was somebody from the new coalition.